Started here. Thanks for joining, guys. My name is Matt. I'm marketing guy at Tech Passport. The format of this webinar is quite short, so we're going to keep it to around 30 minutes. And at the end, we've got a bit of time for a few Q&As. So on the right-hand side, you should see a box which says Q&A box, so you can ask a few questions on there. They'll come through to me, and then at the end, we'll pick a few out. Over the last couple of weeks, I was speaking to a number of suppliers, and hopefully we can answer a few of them here. So I've got two colleagues with me, Layla and Dave, and I'm going to let them do their intros. So over to Dave, who's our COO.
Thanks, Matt. So I've been in the industry for, well, longer than 25 years, but you've got to say anything over 25 years is just over 25 years. Starting out in support, desktop servers, networks, security. I've done support design, architect, and I've worked for leading solution providers, and we've had large and small institutions and customers as customers. I'm a qualified pen tester and forensics engineer.
Awesome. And Layla as well.
Hi there, so I am the CEO at Tech Passport, and I have had just over 10 years worth of experience working in the banking sector, always in vendor-facing roles, so ranging from procurement to vendor management, commercial management. And my last tenure was at HSBC, which I think you can all see on LinkedIn, and I was working on the FinTech onboarding team and noticed there was a bit of a gap in terms of how especially fintechs and startups engage with large corporates, and thought I know how to fix it. So I set Tech Passport up about a year ago. I've been joined by a great team over the past year. There's roughly about 9 of us, and obviously we have Dave and Matt.
Awesome. Thanks very much, guys. Before we get stuck into the sort of details of everything, we wanted obviously to give you guys as much information about what we're doing and the value that we can offer you. But before we get stuck into that, I kind of wanted to ask Layla kind of what her big vision is for Tech Passport and the overall goals, and how much value we can hopefully add to suppliers as part of their journey with connecting with banks. So Layla, what is the big vision?
The big vision, thanks, Matt. So when I started Tech Passport out, and I think the same vision is still there, it's to help suppliers with how they engage with banks and to accelerate that journey. When I was on the banking side, I generally only saw it from the bank side and understanding the challenges that they faced. And knowing that there was a desire from the business side, especially to work at pace, especially with fintechs. Fintechs offer very fintechs especially offer amazing technology, the ability to be a bit more agile, and there's a lot of desire from banks to work with them, but unfortunately the processes just don't allow for it at the moment. So the overall desire is to make that better, and obviously now we're on the supplier side, we get to see what it's like from both angles and understand the challenges that surround it. So our first objective was to look at from a POC perspective to enable contracts to be put into place faster. That was very much focused around knowing that from my experience and my colleagues' experience, how busy procurement teams are, and trying to lighten the load on those with taking some repetitive, repeatable kind of processes off their hands. But as we started to talk to banks and suppliers, we realised there was a huge gap really in terms of when you're onboarding post a POC, from the ability to collate all the vast amount of information, so the compliance and regulatory information. So we really want to try and democratise that kind of set of requirements from banks and pull them together, bring two very different worlds together and make the process a lot faster.
Awesome. I guess kind of building on from that is that I've been involved in the company for about a year now, and I guess one of the challenges and interesting things from my perspective is that being able to distill everything that a bank wants down into a finite or a kind of concentrated form is actually quite a challenge. And I know Dave has put together a list of security questions and everything else around best practices for suppliers. So I kind of wanted to ask Dave on the platform how these questions came about.
so we were asking certain banks what their needs were, and we ended up with over 500 questions, and very specific, and obviously very specific, and we had to distill that down into something that could be answered and give an indication that, you know, your company has got all of the right process and policies and processes in place for the banks. And so we distilled that firstly down into, I think, about 200, if you remember, Matt, and then we went to 100, and we managed to get it down to 32 questions. And they're, at the moment, yes, they're quite broad. They're quite they're obviously not as specific as some of the banks would want at the moment, potentially, but they provide the banks with that comfort that actually you've got the rigor in there, and actually within those documents that you provide will be their answers. So and that was the idea. And then later, to obviously, as the banks come on, to break those out into the questions that they specifically they want answered.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think it started around 500 questions and it came right down. We sort of boiled it right down, didn't we?
I mean, and actually 500 was it could have been a lot bigger.
Yeah.
It's, you know, every question under the sun, but it has to be distilled down into something, and, you know, obviously all the banks are pointing to ISO 27001 or NIST 500 800 553, and they're looking at best practice, but actually if you've got the frameworks in place, that's a big part of actually capturing that. You know, you're not, for instance, if you say you've got a password policy or password standard, if you've gone to the bother of actually creating a password standard, you're not going to. It's likely that you will have looked at best practice and said, well, we want at least 8 characters, and we want it to be complex, and it has to include upper and lowercase characters. So the idea from our side was that actually we're going to ask for those big pieces of information, and then within them are going to be the information that the banks need.
Yeah, I guess that's it, isn't it? Like, I've spoken to a few suppliers who have kind of said they have sort of standard policies, and being able to pull out that information from those as well. I can see Layla is also getting on this.
Yeah, if I can just add to that. So when we're talking with the banks about their requirements, it's very much, from a compliance perspective, it's very much with the view that we will take an 80-20 kind of rule. And we know that working with all the different banks have different detailed requirements, but there is an acceptance across the banks that we're speaking with that there will be a gap analysis basically at the end. So Dave has obviously talked about those key questions that we have in the portal at the moment. The questions will grow, as he said, as we mature, and we've left availability for the banks that we're engaged with to help to populate that and to come up with a common kind of agreement. There's definitely something, Matt, that we're seeing when we're talking with the banks as well, with an appetite to be more collaborative with each other. There are certainly 3 standout banks for us that have indicated they'd like to have some kind of collaboration approach with the ability to support the FCA fintech I've forgotten the word, charter, the FCA FinTech Charter, and that's all about how banks and large corporations work better with fintechs and understand and appreciate the impact of their internal large processes and how that affects small companies. So we're definitely seeing a shift in terms of how banks engage with fintechs and how they want to. Some of the banks, I don't obviously need to call it out, you might already know, some of them put a lot of their information into the public domain to try and improve how information is given to them, or ease the process from a supplier perspective. But even those banks that we see as further ahead in the curve on that experience recognise that there's a real value in having something in a centralised kind of a platform and having an 80-20 rule. So we know we're not going to fix everything, and I think Dave would agree to this. We're not going to fix everything. We're not going to answer every single question, because you would be asked 700, 800 questions, and we've seen this with another company that tried to do it. But if we can take an 80-20 approach, even if we manage to cut your onboarding time down by 50%, that's a matter of months. We see that as a real big win, but we really try not to boil the ocean, but just to make the process better and to improve, to continually improve.
Yeah, and I think the point is we're here for you.
Yes.
That throughout this process, we've put in a load of templates for policies that we've created a lot of templates to help you with areas that maybe that you haven't covered yet, or that is in a format that is that you wouldn't want to show a bank, perhaps. And maybe that dropping it into the template is an easy way. And we are here to talk to you about those areas and to make to help you populate those areas on the portal.
Cool. That kind of leads on to my next question, which was going to be, what do you think the value is of having all of the compliance information in one location? And I'm going to send that straight back to Layla.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So I've had conversations with quite a few banks, and 3 of them have asked a very similar question, or posed a similar statement, and they said, tech passport, okay, it's great, the portal, but what's stopping us from creating our own tech passport and our own upload area for suppliers to come and at their leisure post all of their information from a compliance perspective that can answer all of our security questions if we just adjust our firewalls for existing tools? And I guess, I mean, I might be wrong. I think that from our experience, and we've got a fairly small team, but I think we're kind of indicative maybe from a size perspective of other startups and fintechs. The notion that I could say, Dave, at your leisure, when you have spare time, because we all know that startups have no time, there's no spare time. At your leisure, Dave, can you go and onboard all of our compliance information to this bank and this bank and this bank and this bank across all of them, on the off chance that you might get selected for a POC, maybe you might get looked at some point in the future. And it's understanding the position of the suppliers, and actually that time isn't necessarily available. So what we see as a value is not just in the POC contract negotiation, so you can put a contract into place quickly and you can negotiate that on the portal, removing emails, but from the compliance perspective, it's the ability for you to upload your information once and for that to be collected by multiple parties. And yes, obviously, there's still no guarantee that you're going to be selected, but we act as a marketplace, so you're definitely increasing your opportunity, your chances of being selected, reducing the time and effort that's taken by filling all this information in. And what we really want to do, working with these banks with the FCA in mind, is trying to drive some change. And really, we're looking to suppliers to help us to drive that change in a way that banks engage with you, and understand that you probably haven't got weeks and weeks and weeks available to get your COO to upload all your compliance information into 10 different portals. So that's really where we see the value.
Yeah. I'm going to ask Dave if he's got anything else to add to that as well.
Yeah, yes. We know that obviously if you're a bank, you've got to have all of these things in place to onboard a supplier. We know that suppliers they've got all the information, but and potentially there are some areas that need a little bit of work, specifically around things like anti-bribery and all of these other areas that maybe if you're not connecting to banks currently that you haven't looked at before. We're here to help you to get over that hurdle, but at the end of the day, it's a collaborative. We have to help you get to the point, just to the point where the bank will get to a POC and then we can connect. I mean, further on from that, obviously, if the POC goes well, then there's potentially another level on top of that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Just to add to that, I think that when we've spoken to banks, they have often talked about how maybe early stage startups or companies that haven't engaged with banks before aren't necessarily equipped or in the best position to engage with banks, don't necessarily understand the processes or the vast amount of information that's required. And if you have been through that process, you'll know. But for startups that haven't, it can be very daunting, and then it can increase the times for onboarding dramatically, adding 6-8 weeks, and that impact on the supplier is really quite challenging. So today's points, we're here to support you. We really focus in on the suppliers. We provide our templates. We're offering a period of free support, so we can provide you one-to-one service to upload your information, and any information you need, we're here to help you with, basically.
Cool. That's fantastic. Thanks, Layla and Dave. I'm going to change direction a little bit here. And certainly over the last few weeks, I've had Layla and I have had numerous interesting discussions about. She's been plugged into a lot of conversations with the big banks and has been drip feeding me information about what they're after and this post-COVID world that we're now living in. So I think that she could potentially share a few bits of information with what they're saying and kind of the insights within their world. So I was going to ask Layla, what technologies are banks interested in, and kind of what pieces of information can we share with them today?
Absolutely, great question, Matt. So there is a real mixture in terms of technologies that banks are after, which I think you can appreciate. Something that's standing out from obviously in the wake of COVID is the desire to look at technologies that can enable remote working. So there's definitely a lot of talk around DevOps tools as well, which is something that we weren't expecting, but DevOps tools and collaboration tools, but always the standout kind of requirements regarding like RegTech tools. I guess that kind of goes hand in hand with how we're moving to a much more digital space, and so the need to have regulatory tools in place and security tools in place to support that is, I guess, probably expected. Definitely a desire to look at capital markets, investment and wealth management. I guess, again, all moving into the notion of moving to a more digital world as we're moving away from being able to go into a bank or go and have meetings face to face to manage your wealth. Cybersecurity, again, another big player is around digital currency. So digital money, that's definitely something that's coming up in the radar, on the radar time and time again. Payments, credit and lending, other big topics as well, and originations as well, and digital security. So I think the main kind of standout one at the moment is certainly around the security kind of perspective, but definitely from the payments, lending, cryptocurrency. But they seem to sort of be the main ones. But I suspect as we engage with more and more banks, we're hoping that we might even get one more bank on the trial, but certainly their requirements will come out. Just on the topic of the requirements, so when we've engaged with any of US suppliers who are on this call or anyone who's interested, it's very much driven by what the banks are after. So we've taken their lead and we continue to take their lead. However, if we see a change in the market and we see something that is of interest, when we present that back to the bank. So part of our service is that we provide an account director to support every single bank and make sure that we're sourcing the right kind of suppliers. So feel confident that if we've engaged with you, it's because your technology is definitely required.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Thanks, Layla. And I guess from a supplier's perspective, they've obviously got this information about kind of what the banks are looking for and the sort of general trends going forward into next year. But what can they do? And I guess it's a question for both of you. What can they do to really put themselves in the best or best prepare their profile on our platform before we engage with the banks and start opening up to the buyers? And I think I'll go back to Dave on that one. What do you think they can do to sort of make sure that they've got the best chance of onboarding with a bank?
Well, obviously to fill out the compliance areas as much as possible. So start grouping all of your policies, go through the list, and and what you'll see is that all of the key component areas are there. So all the policies, etc. Just make a list of all those policies. If you're missing anything, or if they're in another place, just start putting those together. And obviously get in touch with us if you've not dealt with anything like anti-bribery and those sort of sections before. Read the guidance notes on the portal, and get in touch with us. We're there to help you. We need to get the compliance section sorted out, but obviously put as much information into your product, put into the product spec as possible, because that does guide, answering all those questions clearly does guide further questions down the line from the banks, and it can be really helpful to them, because especially with the use of dummy data, etc.
Okay, and to Layla as well.
Yeah, just echoing what Dave said, really. I mean, we really do want to be able to support you. So any templates that you're missing or anything that you need some advice on, please get in touch. As I mentioned earlier, we're offering free support to any suppliers who need help uploading their policies and their documents. We know that this is time consuming, so we want to support you as much as possible. So get in touch and we can help you with that. If you've already signed up to the platform, you're under our terms and conditions, so your information is safe with us. I guess I'd like to sort of add one final sort of thought, really, and we were talking about this earlier, Matt. I guess there are lots of marketplaces out in the market, and what Tech Passport is trying to achieve isn't purely just a marketplace, and I think that's the important thing to remember. We're trying to ensure and support the onboarding of suppliers into banks and to make it easier and faster, and so that's really achieved by the data that we're collecting. And so the value that the banks that we're talking to, the real value that they see, isn't just the presentation of 150 products and suppliers, which is where we're up to, which is absolutely fantastic, and thank you to everybody who's joining. It's really about the data that's contained in there, because they see it as really adding value to have that data in one central place for them to collect when they decide to engage with that supplier. So it's really, really important that you take the time to get your information onto the platform, and as I say, if you need help, to contact us. When the banks are using the platform to search on their search tool, they'll be given indicators in terms of how much information has been provided by each supplier. So it's really, really important, if you want to improve your chances of success and you want to join us in trying to change the approach, that you take the time to do it, but lean on us as much as you need, and we're here to help.
Yeah, and I would say also that your success is our success throughout the trial. You know, I completely echo that. Is that we all win. The banks win, you win, and we win if this works. When this works, it's basically we're here to support you and to succeed.
Absolutely. I'm going to echo all that as well. That's fantastic. I realise thanks very much, guys. I realise we're sort of getting tight on a bit of time now. Sorry, I'm going to change my screen over. I've just we've got 5 minutes left, so there's a couple of questions that come in here. I'm just seeing it's popped up here, and hopefully we can answer this. If not, we'll have to email you guys. It says our business doesn't have a supply chain, so no compliance data in this area. Will this count against us and give us a negative score? And I can see Layla is itching to answer this one, so I'm going to put the screen right over to her.
So it won't count against you at all. So what we give to the banks are indication in terms of how much information you've provided. So we give them a percentage complete on each of those sections, but we also give them a yes, no in terms of if you've provided that supply chain or like what specific documents you've uploaded. We've set the priority list on the platform. So you can see the first one is information security, cyber security, and they're the top priorities in terms of what the banks are looking for. If you haven't got supply chain, perhaps it's because you don't need it. And we've certainly spoken to a bank recently. They said don't need supply chain, so we don't see that as counting against you. But we give them some real good indicators before they get to select, have a look into your data when you've signed an NDA. So before that point, we give them specific details in, they've uploaded this information, they've uploaded information. In my personal experience, I don't think the supply chain is ever really a massive, huge obstacle. The biggest obstacles that banks find with onboarding suppliers is generally around the information security and cybersecurity stuff. They're the real big ticket items.
Superb. I'm going to jump into another question as well. I'm just reading it here. Is there any other way, apart from compliance, to make myself more visible to the banks? And I think I'm going to answer. Well, I can't. I'm going to see Layla because I can see her there. She's itching there to answer this one. So, all right, I'll do it as well. So, from my perspective, and speaking to a lot of suppliers, we have two types of profile on Tech Passport. So we have a core and premium, and then within premium, you have the chance to upload a product video. So any information or content that you can make that's easy for the banks to digest when they're comparing different products. Any information around a video that they can view and watch is obviously going to make it easier for them to understand what you're trying to sell to them. We also on our platform have stamps. So the more compliance information you upload, the better. But obviously, if you don't have that, then insurance policies really help. So if you have, like Layla said, it's like cyber, employee, and public insurance policies in place, that's also going to add to your profile, and so the banks can see. And I can see there's a few more questions in here, but I know we're running a bit out of time. I can see Layla here again.
Just to add to that, another big value that banks are seeing is in terms of the use cases. So if you have use cases, please put them into the platform because that's a value. But going back to the point, if you have a great product and there's another great product that matches similar to yours, if you haven't uploaded your compliance information, there might be a chance that they're going to look at the other company. So it's really important. Get your products on board, absolutely. And if you need help from us to onboard your compliance, just get in touch.
Fantastic. Thanks, Layla. We're running short of time here, and I can see a lot more questions coming in. So I'm going to add these into the FAQs on our website as well. Equally, please feel free to email us at info@techpassport.io, and we'll gladly get back to you. I'm going to wrap it up now because I realize we're getting very close to the time. So I'm going to say thank you very much to Dave and Layla for all the information, and thank you very much, guys, for attending as well. So thank you very much, and we'll do one of these again soon.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right,
Bye.
thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.